Hi, my name is Jenny Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have Representative Mark Lowery joining us from the Capitol. He is going to ask Education Secretary Johnny Keys to issue a commissioner's memo to the public school system regarding critical race theory. Hi, Representative. Thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good,
You
good.
recently held a press conference regarding critical race theory. Do you mind talking to us about that press conference?
Yes, I had requested back in early June from the Attorney General an opinion request asking the simple question: does the teaching of critical race theory violate the Equal Protection Clause and the Civil Rights Act of 1964? On Monday, she released her opinion, and the answer was yes. And she gave a very detailed 10-page opinion that points out all the different areas, most of them hinging around the issue of discrimination, depending on how you broach these subjects. And as we talk, I would like to clarify, obviously, that this is not about teaching history. It's not about whitewashing the history of our country that has involved racial conflict through the years, including slavery. But what it does is it deals specifically with critical race theory. And I'll be glad to explain that. But anyway, the press conference was asking or putting a challenge out to Secretary Key, asking him to send a cautionary memo or a commissioner's memo to superintendents, making them aware of this opinion and that they could be subject to, frankly, being taken to court by a parent if a student's constitutional rights are violated.
And so what would that look like for these school districts if this teaching was found in their classrooms?
Well, what we hope it would look like is that they would become hyper vigilant. So many superintendents have been saying, "Oh, this is not going on. It's not going on in their school," and some of them may be very honest about that. They may not know that a teacher is, for instance, an English teacher might be issuing to the students a reading about anti-racism and about issues of diversity and equity that hinge on some of the tenets of critical race theory. So we hope that it'll make principals, superintendents hypervigilant to make sure that this is not being taught in the classrooms, because many times if a parent were, for instance, to sue a school district for some kind of an offense, school districts have been able to hide behind what is called sovereign immunity. If they go before any state court, it is determined that public entities, unless there is gross misconduct, have this sovereign immunity blanket of protection. Well, on a constitutional violation, which is what we are saying the teaching of critical race theory would be, this would be a federal court issue, and as such, sovereign immunity would not be relevant.
You mentioned that this does not include the gross history that our country has endured. This is not, whitewashing our history and not teaching that. This is something completely different. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. Well, one of the things that we've had to deal with is the teaching of the 1619 Project, New York Times narrative project that basically says that July 4th, 1776 is not the actual birth date of America, that the actual birth date is in 1619 when the first African slaves were brought to this continent. And the writer goes on to say that, and ever since then, America's history, its systems, its organizations have been based on white supremacy and white privilege. And that is, one, there's many historians have said that there's historical inaccuracies, but then to make that leap to say because we had slavery in the United States, and by the way, the colonies were the first in the world to pass any kind of edict abolishing slavery or speaking out against slavery. It was only a number of years later that the UK, which actually was a conduit, so to speak. Sorry to use the terminology.
That's okay.
But they were a pipeline for slavery to the colonies. And so America led the way on abolition. Now, it certainly took decades for us to get, for instance, to the Emancipation Proclamation and other times in history where we have pushed back against racism. But unfortunately, critical race theory looks at all those things and says they are embedded in the fabric of America. And even if they happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, it still controls what's going on today. And as such, it takes this position. Many times, teachers who are very really unschooled, maybe in the proper way of conducting these conversations, they look at a student just because of their skin color and they label them. Look at a white student, say because of their color, not because of anything that they know unique to that individual student, that they are either an oppressor or they are privileged. And then turns and talks to the black students and says, because of all these things that have happened in America, you are a victim. Well, that overlooks the power of the individual student to be able to overcome anything. But it also is a false narrative that white student who may also live in poverty, and we have a large amount of poverty that occurs in white families in rural Arkansas, that they're privileged. I'm sure that student would look and go, privileged how? I mean, I don't understand that. So it becomes divisive in the classroom, and it's something that we really don't need to be perpetrating and putting off on these kids. And so we're trying to stop this in Arkansas. I believe Arkansas was at the front of this battle. We took it up during the legislative session, was not able to pass the legislation we wanted, but many southern states really, I think Utah, Montana, other states have also taken on legislation, passed it, governors have signed it, banning the teaching of critical race theory.
Right. And, we are seeing here, especially Northwest Arkansas, there have been a lot of, quote, equity plans that are being implemented in the school districts, and they're being couched in these vague slogans such as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what we're finding in these plans is that the words don't always mean what you think that they mean. Can you talk a little bit about that and how sometimes, words that we think that, sound really nice are what's hidden behind them are actually the tenets of critical race theory?
Right. Well, one good example of that is one of the main writers who is quoted in most critical race theory teaching, Ibram Kendi, has a publication out, How to Be Anti-Racist. Well, you would read that title and go, well, yeah, I want to be anti-racist. But he goes on to say that if you talk about equality, about achieving equality, then you're racist. His most troubling statement is when he says that if you want to cure or heal past discrimination, you can only do that through current discrimination. And if you want to heal current discrimination, you can only do that through future discrimination. And so all these things are couched in these nice terms: diversity, inclusion, equity. But it really is looking at the student, not individually, but looking at them as a class. And there are school districts, Bentonville School District, for instance, has on their webpage a link to resources for this equity training. Well, one of the articles is How to Be an Anti-Racist Grader. And they make the statement that if you tell a student that they are falling behind, then you're racist. Now, I've been an instructor. I've worked with students at the secondary level. I have taught in higher ed. And, that's part of being a teacher, is to inform a student, to let them know that they missed an assignment, or they're some aspect of their writing or whatever has kept them from making a better grade. That's what we should be doing as instructors. And yet this particular resource on the Bentonville Public School website says that if a teacher says that you're falling behind, even if it is done on an individual basis, which it certainly should not be done in the classroom, to embarrass the student. But even if you're dealing with that student one-on-one, then that is racist language. And so a lot of this stuff is flipped upside down. And what I'm hoping to do in talking to different family groups, parent groups, to let them know here are the terms that you need to be looking for. If you just ask to look at documents or instructional materials that relate to critical race theory, they're going to be able to sneak other stuff by you.
Right. Right, because they're going to be able to say, well, we don't have critical race theory in our classrooms, and because they're not holding up those specific documents, they're couched in other things. Well, so you mentioned parents can ask for these documents, but how can we empower these students when they go into the classroom, specifically maybe in the junior high, the high schools? They're not leaving their constitutional rights at the classroom doors. How can we help these students and their parents now that they're actually schools in session? What advice would you give them?
Right. Well, and the act that you mentioned, Act 684, that was passed in the spring session, it is a bill that tells parents that they have a right to ask to review and to challenge instructional materials, any events that surround that particular instruction. I was asked through committee chairman if I wanted to sponsor that legislation, but it was conditioned upon me dropping my legislation that would ban critical race theory. So I kind of saw it, frankly, as extortion. Plus, even though I'm citing the bill as a tool that can be used, it really didn't go far enough. For one thing, it did not include something in there where the parents could ask that their children be able to opt out of that instruction while the protest is being considered. Because it first goes to the building level administrator, the principal. The principal, it doesn't specify how many days they have to make a decision. But if the parent is not satisfied with that response, then they can appeal to the superintendent. Well, again, it's not specified how long the superintendent has. And then lastly, it could go to the school board. Well, by that time, a semester could go by. 2 months could go by. And there's nothing in there that says that parent should be able to opt their child out. It's a good first step that goes along also with FOI laws, whether you can FOI. But again, you have to know specifically what you're asking for.
Well, so do you anticipate Secretary Key sending out this memo to the school districts once you contact him about it?
I'm hoping he will. I guess the only thing will be just wondering how terse or cautionary the memo will be. He may just send a memo saying, "I want to make you aware of this opinion," and that would be fine. I think there's a lot of superintendents that would use that. They would like to have that to be able to caution their teachers. Listen, I've talked to you about this before, but this is important. This has risen to a new level. But I'm hoping Secretary Key would go the next step and actually issue a very stern cautionary memo, a commissioner's memo, that says you need to be on alert, because if this is taught in any classroom, if any activity takes place that deals around these issues of diversity and of looking at students based on their color, their ethnicity, rather than seeing them as individuals, then you could find yourself in a world of trouble.
Anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to add?
Well, the thing I'm most excited about this, I have been saying for years that many of the Republicans that voted against my bill to ban critical race theory, and there were a number, they will try to hang their hat on, well, I'm for local control. The state party platform, the Republican Party platform, espouses that we embrace local control. When it comes to education, the ultimate local control are the parents. And the parents need to be empowered. And I think what is happening now, I've heard of a group in Northwest Arkansas. I think you might have attended the meeting, where on a Saturday, just an organizational meeting, so to speak, 200 parents showed up. Now, I think it's very interesting. It could be providential, really, that a lot of the concern by parents are both about critical race theory, but also about mask mandates. And I think both of those do fit together, because we're talking about liberty. We're
That's right.
talking about the ability of a parent to be the decision maker for their child. And so I think that this is a powerful point in Arkansas history of notifying parents that they can be a part. Next year, after redistricting, the redrawing of school board district lines, my understanding, every school board position will come vacant.
Very
Next year will be the time for parents that have said, I want to get involved. I don't know how to do it. I can't be a state legislator. You can be a school board member, and you should be, because that's the battleground right now.
Great perspective. Thank you so much, Representative. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.